All right, Chapter 3, Section 3 is going to ask, why did Britain and France pursue a policy of appeasement? Appeasement is the policy of giving into the demands of an aggressor in order to avoid conflict. And Britain and France, they are going to be especially guilty of this during the 1930s. Now, why do they do this? Well, there's a couple different reasons that can be broken down into a couple different categories. First off, economic reasons, right, having to do with the economy. Military reasons, having to do with the state of the military. And then lastly, political reasons, power, how countries interact with each other, etc. Starting with economic, right, the Great Depression is going on. During this very strong economic downturn that is quite literally killing the world economy, paying for a war is not a good idea. Also, countries are trying to maintain what little international trade they have left. So, again, going to war is not really in anyone's best interest. Military is not prepared for war. Politics. Britain and France, they also want to keep Italy, for example, as an ally against Hitler. When Italy invades Abyssinia, Britain and France aren't really going to do much in terms of condemning Italy because they think that Italy could still be a decent ally against Hitler. Also, public opinion is very much anti-war. The public does not support it. They do not want to go to war. They remember the cost of World War One, so that's not popular. Now, appeasing in terms of who is getting appeased is mostly looking at Germany and Italy and Japan, and who is doing the appeasing? Well, it's mostly going to be the League of Nations, Britain, France, any powerful nation really. Another country that is getting appeased would be Japan as they go and continue their invasion of Manchuria. The League of Nations is going to strongly condemn them. Japan does not listen. Also, the League does create an investigative panel to go figure out why exactly this is happening, and of course, they wind up blaming Japan, but also somewhat China. Regardless, Japan does not stop, and there's really no action taken against them. Now, pivoting from the fascist countries of the world to one that is definitely not fascist, remember how the USSR was communist and no nation really wanted to play with them because they didn't trust the communists or Joseph Stalin? Well, Stalin fears that Hitler would eventually try to invade the Soviet Union, and he thinks this because he sees Germany constantly being appeased, for example, at like the Munich conference when he's given the Sudetenland on the promise he won't take Czechoslovakia, and he wants to seek security. So Stalin is going to try to make nice with Britain and France, who for the most part reject him because the USSR is communist. He does kind of get a non-aggression pact with France, but again, he sees France as constantly appeasing other nations, and he believes that they would appease any invasion of the Soviet Union. But anyway, he does this because he wants security of the Soviet Union. He wants safety from Hitler. He sees Hitler repeatedly violating the Treaty of Versailles, allied with other fascists, other dictators, again, the anti-Comintern, as we remember, anti-communist. Now, the USSR is actually going to join the League of Nations in 1935, but even while they're members, they're still going to be very critical of it because the League, other democratic nations, they're making the USSR feel more and more isolated. Now, feeling more and more isolated and really feeling the need to get security from Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany, well, this is going to lead Stalin and the USSR to actually seek closer relations with Hitler and with Germany. The idea is that closer relations gives the USSR more safety from Hitler by being closer to Hitler. Now, please do keep in mind, Stalin is communist, Hitler is fascist. Fascism, communism, they don't exactly like each other, and please get it through your brain that Stalin and Hitler do not like each other. They are not best friends. However, this gives both of them some mutual benefit. This is very much a treaty of mutual benefit. Stalin gets exactly what he wants. He gets time. He gets time to prepare the Red Army. And Hitler, well, he gets to invade Poland without any Soviet retribution. And in return for not retaliating when he invades Poland, Hitler is going to allow Stalin to take the other half of Poland. He's also going to give him a couple of other territories. Speaking of Hitler, again, Hitler... I cannot say this enough. He considers France and Britain weak. He knows they do not want to go to war and that they're avoiding it at all costs. Knowing this, Hitler seeks to invade Czechoslovakia. Now, he starts by going for the Sudetenland. The Sudetenland is a piece of land that is very valuable. It is part of Czechoslovakia, and once Hitler begins to mobilize for the Sudetenland, Britain, France, Italy, they're going to call a conference to figure this out and try to get a compromise. The conference is known as the Munich Conference. The Munich Conference gives way to the Munich Agreement. Here's what the Munich Agreement says. Hitler can keep the Sudetenland and every single other territorial acquisition he's gotten, and all he has to do is promise that he will not take Czechoslovakia. Hitler happily agrees. This is a huge example of appeasement. This is like as prime appeasement as you can get. Like the definition of it is being spelled out here. Britain and France are quite literally giving into Hitler's demands because they want to avoid war. They are giving him what he wants because they do not want to get into a conflict. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, he's going to be a champion of appeasement. He believes that this is going to be piece of his time and that avoiding war is going to be the best strategy. Future Prime Minister Winston Churchill, he hates appeasement. He has a point of view that this dooms Czechoslovakia and it's going to lead to war anyway. Both of them do want peace, but they disagree on how it should. But they disagree on how it should be achieved, on whether or not to actually use appeasement. Now, French Prime Minister Delay, he takes this as France just having to give into whatever Hitler wants, since France was unprepared for war. Does he want to do it? No. Does he have a choice? No. Czechoslovakia is not involved in the Munich Conference, even though it's Czech territory that's being given away. If Czechoslovakia was involved, I probably would guess that they would not agree to this. Also, Soviet Union is not involved here, even though they're not like directly mentioned here. They are an ally of Czechoslovakia, so this does 100% impact the Soviets, because this is where they really start to see that Britain and France are more than willing to just give Hitler what he wants in order to avoid war. And this is where he starts to think that if Hitler went to invade the Soviet Union, which he obviously wants to do, that once Hitler invades, Britain and France would say, oh, okay, Hitler, fine, you can have that, but no more. He thinks that they would continue to appease him. Now, the Munich Agreement is going to lead to the Soviets getting closer to the Nazis, because again, Stalin takes this as Britain and France's appeasement no nose bound. They are traitors who will just keep appeasing Hitler. This means Stalin will not get any help from them. Again, they were not invited to the Munich Agreement. They still perceive them as untrustworthy because they are communist, and this is going to wind up pushing Stalin towards Hitler. The British Parliament overwhelmingly votes in favor of accepting the Munich Agreement. And again, this is a huge example of appeasement, but given that the Parliament overwhelmingly votes to accept it, this still gives you a pretty good idea that the public does not want to go to war. War is still incredibly unpopular. Hitler is given the Sudetenland, and again, as long as he promises not to invade Czechoslovakia, and what does he do? Well, he turns around and invades Czechoslovakia not too long afterwards. So, was the Munich Agreement successful? Well, if you like appeasement, then sure. Chamberlain loved it. Churchill hates it. Once Hitler invades Czechoslovakia, it becomes very obvious that the policy of appeasement fell. But why do they do this? And this is going back to that overall question for the chapter. Why did Britain and France pursue a policy of appeasement? And the overall answer is that they are not prepared for war. They're not. They are not prepared to war. They're not prepared to fight. Public opinion is very much against war. The Great Depression is still going on, which hampers pretty much any country's ability to prepare for war, which is what Hitler is pretty much gambling on every single time. Because remember, each and every one of Hitler's actions here, it is a gamble. They are gambles. Everything he does is a gamble. If Hitler is met with any resistance, he could have potentially been stopped, but there is no resistance, and he considers Britain and France weak, so he continues. So Great Depression is deeply hampering any country's ability to really go fight. Militaries are not prepared. Public opinion is still very much anti-war, and the way that Britain and France see it, it is pretty much easier, right, to give into Hitler's demands than to fight him. That's going to be it for the third section of chapter 3. Up next, the last section of the chapter, which covers pretty much why did war start.